Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own?
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to, and I think they're going to remember this day. And this was a big day for NATO. You know, this was a very big day. They took it. One of the gentlemen said, you know what? We've been trying to raise money raise the rate for 30 years, he said, 20 years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long time. He said, until you came along, it never happened. What you did is amazing. It's been sort of an amazing day.
Ya queda muy evidente que ese discurso que nos han repetido el gobierno de Pedro Sánchez, las élites europeas durante todos estos años, de que el rearme y la OTAN sirven para defendernos, es una auténtica mentira. Una mentira hipócrita y criminal. El rearme y la OTAN nos ponen en serio peligro y no sirven para protegernos ni para defendernos, sino que van a servir para pagarle a Trump las guerras que ordena, para hacer las guerras ilegales que Trump ordena y para poner a Europa al servicio de las dos potencias, Estados Unidos e Israel, que en este momento son la mayor amenaza para la seguridad de la humanidad y para la paz en el mundo.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's 11th episode of Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. Tarik, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How are you, Kevork? Thank you for having me.
I'm good, doing very well. And I would like to welcome everyone, those who are watching on YouTube, Rumble, and on Ganjin World, and special thanks to our friend Adrian Dittman, who is moderating the live chat today. On this channel, guys, we accept all the opinions, and you can express your opinion in a civilized and manner. Just don't use the slur words, don't attack, don't troll, just have a civilized conversation, even if you don't agree with us. And that's why Adrian is there, just to filter when some people come and posting just letters or some flags all of a sudden to, start, let's say, some fight in the live chat. I played this video at the beginning, Tarik, because I followed what happened in the NATO summit. And it seems to me that this talk about the daddy things, or what Rutte called Trump a daddy, it has a deep layer in it, and that is what these European countries and other NATO members see in the United States as the daddy of this alliance, and that is the boss of this alliance, right? After a few years of, few years ago, all the other NATO countries rejected to increase the defense expenditure, the 5%. And now most of the NATO alliance countries have accepted this, which gives you the indication that the United States was and still is the boss of this alliance, and they have persuaded the other countries to join the wagon of the expenditure in one way or another. How do you see the US role now in NATO after this summit? Do you see that other European countries have become more in line with NATO, with Trump's line in this case, because they were rejecting Trump's premise in this case in the past?
Yes. Yeah. The short answer is yes, right? Because it's not only that they have fully given in to maybe Trump's single most important demand from NATO, which was that the Europeans especially should pay more. They have also, at the same time, really not gotten anything in return. Right? We've got some rhetoric that even Trump sort of believes in NATO now. Yeah, right? He's been sort of sugarcoating his usual language a little bit. We've got a little bit of rhetoric about Article 5, but we haven't really seen anything that makes any real difference, right? So the Europeans have agreed to pay a much higher price, and the goods they're getting, it's essence from the US. This is what this is. This is Europeans paying for US protection, right? Which is a very strange type of protection. It's more like mafia protection. The goods haven't really changed. If anything, they have become, the quality has decreased under Trump, right? And the Europeans have capitulated entirely on this issue. There's no more resistance except in very exceptional small cases, holdouts like Spain, or I think Slovenia or Slovakia. I think it was Slovakia actually. But on the whole, all the big European players and as a whole, all the European NATO members have completely given in to Trump. And not only have they done that, but it's very interesting, they have made a point of it. They have really talked about this. And Rutte is just the tip of the iceberg here. You know, Rutte's email to Trump, not only that he called him daddy, but his fawning, submissive, pandering email that he sent to Trump even ahead of the summit, and that then Trump published, even that email indicated this new style in NATO, which is to make their submission extremely direct and very, very open. And it's almost like the two sides, right? Washington and the Europeans have both agreed to become extremely blunt. The Americans are very blunt now in humiliating the Europeans and in making it very clear who the boss is, very brutally, right? And the Europeans have now become very blunt in submitting to them. And the strange thing about this is that you find this very concrete submission, which is about money looking 10 years ahead. So this is a very serious commitment, right?
Yes.
Very concrete, very costly submission comes with rhetoric about how Europe can play a larger role. So as if this were somehow a matter of autonomy. It is actually exactly the opposite. The perversion we are seeing is that Europe, after the Cold War has ended, always had one problem. Europe should have spent more on its defense, but in return, it should have emancipated itself from the US. That would have been a straightforward and advantageous policy. Spend more on defense, maybe not as radically as now, I'm not saying that, but spend some more on defense, but free yourself from the United States. And what we are seeing now is the exact opposite. Spend much more on defense and submit to the United States even more. You cannot really think of a more perverse policy outcome, I believe.
Yeah, it also shows the quality of the politicians in NATO. This is the head of NATO, right?
Yes.
And the language used is important to reflect the mentality and the opinion like you're expressing at the end of the day. And this leads me to this leads into different interpretation actually about where NATO is heading, but more seriously also who is really in charge of NATO. Because if you see someone like Mark Rutte with his past, with his policies in the Netherlands and the foreign policy that especially he engaged in the Middle East and in the European Union, you ask yourself the question, how did they end up in this position? Which also leads me to believe that it is now demanded and requested for less qualitative politicians to become in senior positions in NATO and also in the European alliance, in this case, in the EU. It's not a coincidence that we have a generation of politicians who can't really speak well, they cannot really express their opinions well, and their language is broken, even in their mother tongue in some cases. But these people are in charge of serious matters, right? And this is the thing that frightens me, that where are we heading towards? Because now we have an increased expenditure, 5% in exception for Spain. But Germany, for example, our friend Thomas Fazi, he published an article in Unheard, titled Germany's Dangerous Submission, Atlanticists Don't Care About the National Interest. So at the NATO summit, Germany's new chancellor, Merz, is expected to present his plan to transform the Bundeswehr, which is the German army, into the most powerful conventional army in Europe. Now, doesn't this signal, this signals a rupture with the fundamental strategic identity Germany has maintained since 1945? Yeah. This is the first time Germany goes into militarization, but in the past, the US rejected the militarization of Germany. So what has changed?
You can qualify that, but there's definitely huge rupture here. I totally agree. Absolutely agree.
But haven't the Americans changed also their attitude toward Germany in this case, that this European country should lead probably some of the files in Europe, especially when it comes to Ukraine? Like without US consent, Germany would not have had the opportunity to increase its expenditure.
Yes. I suspect that there is an American policy now that takes the risk, as it were, the long-term risk of allowing Germany, this united Germany that re-emerged after the Cold War, to become militarily significantly stronger than ever before. But the idea is that it is under such perfect control that this increased military power will be of benefit to the United States in Eurasia and Western Eurasia. Because it won't challenge them again. It won't challenge them. It will be a more powerful tool, a more powerful servant. And this is, of course, if you think about it really long term, then this is a very risky strategy, even for the Americans, because the Americans don't know the future either. No. And both of us, we have lived long enough to see them make one big mistake after the other. So they may be miscalculating. But I think what you've just asked also has to do with what you said before, when you were talking about the types of politicians we now have in the EU and in NATO and in Europe, where it is obvious that many of them are conspicuously weak. They're intellectually weak, they're even rhetorically weak, they're professionally weak, right? And I believe that this is a surface reflection of the fact that most European ruling elites have been politically captured. These are actually, if you want to use an old-fashioned term, it's not a perfect fit, but I think it's useful. These are comprador elites now. These are comprador elites now. Somebody like Ursula von der Leyen is not working for Europe. She's not. She's not working for Germany. That may surprise some people, right? Because she's so incredibly Germanic. But she's not ultimately working for Germany either. She's working for the US and Israel. That's it. That's what she's really working for. And I'm not saying she's being bribed. I have to be very careful so that the police doesn't come. I'm not saying she's being bribed. I'm not saying she's a traitor. I'm saying objectively, if you look at what she actually does, it benefits the US most. Second is Israel. It's not Europe. And it's not Germany. She may think that. She may be convinced that she is working for Europe, but she's not. And this will become very clear in the long run. Rutte, of course, Mark Rutte from the Netherlands, is a perfect example. Look, a NATO general secretary doesn't have real power. He pretends he does, but he doesn't have power. These people never had power. A NATO general secretary is basically a figurehead, right?
Yes.
And what Rutte is doing, he's making himself look important by cultivating at the price of humiliating flattery, a special personal relationship with the American president. That's what he's really doing. And there he becomes a very good representative of this generation of European politicians. They see nothing wrong with humiliating themselves abjectly in public before an American leader, because they think that's normal. That's what we do.
Also in front of their people. That's the thing. Like when you go to social media and you read the comments, it's sometimes I'm like, wow, you read like 50 comments and all of them are criticizing.
Of course. So, and then not to speak about people like Kaya Kallas and so on, right? So what we are seeing is what happens in a disincentivized, it's a misincentivized system. in Europe and in European nation states, most elites are not actually trying to do their best for the countries anymore. They may think that, but it's not actually what happens in
Yes.
the end. Because, and this is, I think, what Thomas Fasi was also writing about for the German case, they are genuinely completely confused about what is the national interest and what is American or Atlanticist interest. They cannot possibly distinguish between these two things anymore. They assume that everything that is Atlanticist is also in the national interest. And at the same time, this is, of course, extremely useful for their careers, right? These are the perfect
Yes.
team players who get advanced because they're playing their roles so well.
Yes. Tarik, I didn't know the gravity of the matter until I read a little bit more in this article about the numbers that Germany is willing to spend in the next years on the military.
I know.
So the scale is really staggering. I'm quoting now from the article, a proposed 400 billion euro in defense and security investments, including a plan to raise annual defense spending to 5% of GDP, as demanded by NATO. That would represent nearly half of the federal budget, which is around 225 billion euros. So how would this transformation, what kind of consequences would this have on the political and social layers in Germany, on the domestic level in Germany, when you spend this amount of money?
Look, let me say one thing first, which is that I think in this article, Fasi, the figures he gives, I think he's being a very good journalist, because he's using a very conservative figure. This is the lower end. It may be actually much more. It may be much more that will be spent in the end, but let's not go into this. But 400 billion is the lower end of what's going to happen. And so almost half the government's budget is also the lower end, as strange as this may sound. Now, this second point about the government budget, I'd like to emphasize this. Because what NATO, what the Americans, what our European elites are doing with us is they're misleading us by using these GDP-related figures, right?
Yes.
You're constantly being confronted with, oh, it's a difference between 2% and 5%, right?
Yes.
Most people will understand that that's a big difference already, but some people will be misled thinking, well, these are both fairly small figures, right? But what you really have to look at, as you've just done, and as Fasi did, you have to look at the share of government spending, not GDP, right? They're measuring it against all of the economy, and they should measure it against the expenditure of the state, because that's a politically relevant figure. And they're not doing it because that share is so much higher. Because then you see that these countries are being pushed, as Fasi says, it's not only Germany, to go up to close half of their government spending for the bloody military. I mean, that's insane. I'm not even a pacifist. That's just economically insane. So what will this do? This is, your original question. There is an attempt, and I see it very well in German media, to lie to people. And I do think it's a lie, to deceive people and make them think that you can have a policy like that, massively overspent by the state on the military and some related infrastructure, but that doesn't really matter that much in the end. And at the same time, this can somehow drive your economy as a whole and then make everybody wealthier and more well off. This is wrong. This is wrong. Every economist knows this doesn't work. And if it works for a few years and then it breaks down. This type of military Keynesianism, where the state totally overspends on the military and then expects the economy as a whole to grow from there. You can get an effect for 2 to 5 years out of this, but that's it. After that, the bills are coming due. This was true for Nazi Germany. They did this in the 30s. What a lot of people don't know is that this whole system that they were running, that was a type of military Keynesianism, was coming to its economic end by the time they started the war in Europe. It's very clear they couldn't have gone on like this. It didn't work well, actually, except for driving a huge war of conquest in the end. And it is something, I'm not comparing obviously with Nazi Germany, but we have seen some military Keynesianism elements recently in Russia, The Russians have had much better reasons for doing this, right? They have been much smarter about it, and they've had several good years. They've had several good years in spite of this massive sanctions war from the West. All of this is true, but it's also true that we are getting more and more information out of Russia, because Russia is actually not that unfree. They can talk about this. They do.
Yes.
That they are concerned about this model now hitting its limits, So this whole idea that you can just overspend on the military and that's going to drive your economy as a whole, forget it. It's not going to happen. But that is what people are being told. So why are they being told this deception, this lie? Because in reality, what will happen, of course, is that these states will have to curb expenses on everything else: education, health, old age,
so
unemployment.
Goodbye to welfare.
Yes, you name it. It's not going to be guns and butter. It's going to be guns instead of butter. Definitely.
So soon we will see more German, let's say, people over 60 years old collecting bottles from the streets, and this is a phenomenon that I have seen that is increasing in Germany.
Look, Germany even now, and I went through those figures about half a year ago. That was shortly before the elections. I was writing an article, and I can't give you the figures now. I'm a human being and not a computer. But what I remember very well is that indicators such as how many people have enough to actually comfortably cover the household expenses, how many people have a constant deficit, how many people are close to the official poverty limit, all of these things, then you can actually look into statistically. How many people rely on public food support through what the Germans call Tafeln? You know this phenomenon. It's not, well, you're in Germany, so basically soup kitchens. That would be the American terms. You go through one of them after the other. Germany is already in a much worse situation than, for instance, in the 1990s. It's very, very clear. So what the Merz government is promising people now is that they can give them both massive rearmament, and somehow with the massive rearmament, a big economic surge, because that's what it would take, so that the market can somehow miraculously once again take care of getting people out of these holes, right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The people who have it hard now, many of them will still have it hard. And my guess is that a lot of people will be added who will also find it very hard to get through the next 10 years.
Yep. By the way, one of our friends just posted the quote from Chancellor Merz's recent statement saying Israel is doing our dirty work. And by the way, guys, I have read in the German press that they have submitted a legal complaint against Friedrich Merz because of this statement.
It made my day. I was so happy.
They quoted the Constitution and some of the articles in the law. So I'm not a legal expert on this.
I'm not either. But from the little I've read up on, they have a really good case. But I don't think they will prevail, because I'm sorry, but justice can be extremely politicized. And I don't think that the federal procuracy, the Generalanwalt, Bundesanwalt, and the Bundesanwaltschaft will actually pursue the case. I can't imagine it. And that's because of politics. But on the merits, if you think about what Merz has said, and if you think about the legal issues that implies, the people who are suing them, they should win. They have a really good case.
Indeed. Steve says, you two are great. You should do a show together. That's exactly what we do here, Steve. This show is called Cold War 2.0. We do a weekly show with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. And this comes every Friday at 5 p.m. Central European time and 11 a.m. Eastern American time. So
Kevork and I, we are recidivists. We do it every week. We are
every week, guys.
Indeed.
And guys, this is also the Substack of Tarik, where he also publishes his almost daily, let's say, posts and articles on his account. A lot of them, believe me.
Yeah,
He's
but not.
publishing a lot. So if you're also into reading Substack articles, I would highly recommend and encourage you guys to follow Tarik also on Substack. And since we're speaking about Germany, in this case, our friend Fazi says that these changes are not just about military doctrine, they reflect a deeper transformation in Germany's foreign policy posture. And in this case, I want to quote one of our friends who said, it's like the US is telling the EU, hey, EU, we will take on the Middle East, you take on Russia, and we will meet in China. And when I want to, when I want to combine this with a recent statement for Ursula von der Leyen, when she said Donald Trump is correct and China is the problem, it gives an impression that it's true. Europe will focus on Russia in Ukraine. The United States is now cleaning the Middle East from any anti-American and anti-Zionist forces. And after that, they will come after China. You, Tarik, you argued recently in your recent Substack article, and this is the article, guys, which he published recently on the 26th of June, so yesterday, Iran, BRICS, and the danger of strategic patience. Could you please elaborate the premise of your article and why it is dangerous to continue on the path of strategic patience for Iran, for BRICS, which includes, of course, China?
Yes, I'll keep it short, right? It's a longer article, but I'll try to do it short. So the basic idea is quite simple, namely that the thing that just happened to Iran, the combined attack, mostly by the US and Israel, although other Western states were actually involved as well. But let's say this US-Israel attack on Iran and all its criminality, its brutality, was also an attack on a BRICS member, right? Iran, since January 2024, I think, is one of the currently 10 members of BRICS, right? And it's an important one if you want to make distinctions. That means a BRICS member has been attacked by several non-BRICS states. That's significant, right? And at the same time, and I'm saying this without irony and without complaint, I'm just saying this analytically, BRICS couldn't really do anything at all. What BRICS as a whole did, they issued a statement, right? Brazil did this on in the service of BRICS because Brazil has a rotating chairmanship right now. There is an official statement by BRICS. I think it was issued on the 24th. And when you read it, it's a statement, but that's it. Single members of BRICS may have been doing something. So we don't quite know what Russia did. They probably didn't talk much about it. But even if you consider that, the overall story remains a BRICS member was badly beaten up by the US and Israel, and BRICS couldn't really change anything about it. Now, here's the problem. BRICS is, I think, the single most important international association in the emergence of multipolarity. There are others, but I think BRICS is the key, right? Multipolarity, I believe, will come. It's a historically, you can't stop this trend, but how it will come is a very important question. And I think that there are very important forces in the West concentrated in the US. The US is in the lead, who will fight tooth and nail to stop multipolarity. And that means they will fight to stop BRICS, right? How can you stop BRICS if you've just seen what happened to Iran? It's hard to attack Russia directly. The West has attacked Russia, but indirectly through the proxy war in Ukraine. But if you attack Russia directly, the risks increase massively. It's also actually very risky to attack China directly, the two most powerful BRICS members. But what if some people in Washington start thinking, hey, let's pick off the weaker BRICS members. Let's go after, we went after Iran, let's go after Ethiopia, let's go after Indonesia maybe, let's go after, we can betray our vassal Sisi, let's go after Egypt. So that would be a pattern, right? And if BRICS every time can't help and just starts repeating, well, we are not a military alliance, then that will not make a difference. The overall effect will be that the West will take BRICS apart. One war of aggression or threat of a war of aggression at a time. It will deprive BRICS of standing and legitimacy because the West will stage, as it were, a great show of examples where it will show everybody in the global South, you can join BRICS, but BRICS cannot protect you from us. That will be very important. And it won't help then if a Russian president or a Chinese president come out and say, well, yes, but we never said we would protect you. That won't help. That won't help. No. So here's the problem. During this transition from this older world, which we need to get out of, to a new world of multipolarity, we have to expect that the stakeholders in the old world will fight. They will fight against the rise of multipolarity. They will fight against BRICS. And that means you cannot just rely on multipolarity just coming about on its own. There will have to be a deterrence at least. I don't know how to do this. I know how, I do have a sense of how extremely difficult it will be. I know, I understand. But I also know that if BRICS doesn't solve this problem, if they pretend there isn't a military issue, the West will not try to do this again and again and again. The West will take them apart. Gradually, one step after the other. So BRICS needs to solve this now. BRICS needs to solve this. When the next Iran-like thing happens, BRICS has to have a different way of responding. That's my main thesis.
Actually, it's also the BRICS, Russia, China, Iran, those are the most important, let's say, military powers in this alliance. They have given a really bad look as optics and also as practical strategy. When the issue came, for example, to Syria, they couldn't protect their ally. So in front of the eyes of the other countries who have an interest in joining, let's say, an alliance, whether it is military or economic, if the BRICS economic bloc cannot invest in a country like Syria, and they don't show an interest, because Syria applied to join the BRICS in 2018, and they never said yes till the regime change happened. And then Russia is the protector militarily of Syria, also Iran, and they both withdraw basically in one way or another, and they leave the scene completely to the pro-American camp. This gives a really bad signal to the countries who would like the protection of alternative powers, right?
Exactly. In fact, Kevork, I would go farther. I would say, look, if the West targets BRICS, and we know that Trump, for instance, explicitly hates BRICS, right? There's a famous moment, this is already half a year ago or so, where he rants about Spain. And the reason is that he thought that Spain was in BRICS, which is wrong, right? But it still showed you that Trump knows about BRICS and he hates it. They understand the challenge. And here, that means countries that want to join, and right now they're like, I don't know, 24 or so who are interested who have asked. So BRICS is a growing organization at this point. Countries who want to join must know that we can get into BRICS without the West targeting us. But that means that BRICS has to have some way of protecting them. It can't just say to these countries, you come and join us. That means you be on the blacklist of the West, and we can't help you there. That's not working. And there's a second point, which is also very important. A lot of people look at BRICS, people more or less like you and me with all sort of political ideas, and they're happy. And I understand that because they're saying, look, almost half the global population, at least over 35% of global GDP in purchasing power parity, 30% of global oil production. This is all already in BRICS, already. But you know what the problem with this is? This also paints a fat target on BRICS. Imagine BRICS would never have worked. Imagine BRICS would not be a success story as it is. Then nobody in Washington would care. That wouldn't be a problem for them. But the problem is exactly now that they're so successful, they're becoming a target, an urgent target. And they cannot just sit around complacently and say, hey, we never thought about military alliance. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
And this is what Tarik is saying, guys. Some of you say in the live chat that BRICS is not about a military alliance. This is exactly what he's saying. That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's the problem. In the
Yeah.
real, understand this. I know this, but in the real world, when your enemy is after you with a sword, right? Trying to hack you to pieces, and you turn around and face your enemy and you say, "I've always been a pacifist,"
Yeah.
that's not going to protect you. Your
No.
enemy is going to say, "That's great because it makes my job really easy with you."
Yeah.
That's BRICS situation now. It doesn't help them to say, "Well, we were designed differently," because the West's answer will be, "That's wonderful. That makes you
That's
weak.
true.
We will crush
That's
you."
true.
So
That's
BRICS
very
has to
true.
evolve. That's what I'm saying. BRICS needs to evolve.
So BRICS have to evolve. Also, we addressed Iran a little bit. And in this case, Strack Zimmermann from the FDP, the Free Democratic Party, which is a center-right party, she says, quote, "The moment will come when we can be grateful to Israel for having done this. This means bombing Iran. And in their mind, Israel and the United States have obliterated the nuclear program of Iran, and they have sent Iran years, let's say, back. This is an issue that I would like to really know from you, because I listened to statements of politicians from the ruling coalition in the government. I have listened to a politician like Strack Zimmermann from the FDP, and they're in the opposition now. And they also listened to some politicians from the AFD. AFD was divided. Some of them were critical of the attacks against Iran, and the others were very much pro-Israel. But the general, let's say, statements about this issue, and that is, Israel and the United States were successful in these attacks. Are they selling this talking point as a victory so that we move on the issue of Iran, or they really believe that is the case? Because in my opinion, they're selling this narrative to the people that if we achieved victory, then why would we go to war again against Iran, right?
Look, I don't know. I mean, you've pinpointed the big question, but I don't know the answer either. But what I can say on my part is, in a way, I hope that they're trying to deceive the public. Because if that's what they're trying to do, then it means that they themselves are not very keen on the next round of fighting. Right? Not that I'm saying they don't want to go ever to go to war with Iran again. No, unfortunately, that's not the case. But if their strategy right now, or their tactic, really is to say, "Oh, we won already, and therefore we don't have to do anything else," that would be an indication that they're not very keen to go on fighting right now, at least.
Yes.
Okay, in that sense, it's a good thing, in that very cynical, objective sense. But I agree with you, I think I agree with you in that we don't know, and they can't know either. I don't believe that Strack Zimmermann or anybody currently in the German government knows. I don't think the Americans know. I doubt the Israelis actually know. We have, I've read a couple of things about this, and the picture I'm getting is, it's by no means clear. It's clear that there has been a lot of damage, right? Let's not forget the Israelis have, as they always do, murdered, not just assassinated. Let's use the right term. They have murdered scientists and their families, because that's what Israel does. It can murder anybody they like, no questions asked. So that's a setback. They have murdered many high-ranking military figures. That's a setback for Iran. They have, together with the Americans, done great damage to a number of installations, Natanz, Isfahan, Fordo, and others, that have to do with Iran's nuclear program. We have to assume they've done damage. That's a reasonable assumption. But we don't know the extent of the damage. We don't know that from any reliable source. We know what Trump tells us, but we know that Trump tells people what he likes to tell them so that he can profit from it politically. We know that Trump doesn't care about reality, right? We know that there are other people who tell us that, well, maybe some of the installations, for instance, at Fordo could actually be revived. Maybe, maybe not. And then, as you know, there's the big question of what has happened to the 60% enriched uranium that Iran already has had, right?
Yep.
We see different figures, but basically we're talking about sort of 400 kilograms, I think, right?
Yes.
That's not a small amount. That's enough for a few bombs, maybe two, maybe more, right? If you further enrich it to 90%, right? Which wouldn't take long. And from everything I've read, in open sources, right? I don't have secret information. We don't know where that stuff is. So there's no doubt that Iran has suffered a massive setback, but we do not know whether it has been, so to speak, lethal or temporary. That's my image of the situation.
Indeed. I think one of the reasons, so there were multiple factors why the US and Israel waged this war against Iran, one of which is the nuclear program. The other one is to break a sovereign country, like the shock factor and the attacks that they did in the first few days. They wanted to create chaos, a revolution against. So things happen organically from on the domestic level instead of sending boots underground or carrying out a large military attack against Iran. But I think after the fourth and the fifth day, the type of attacks Iran carried out against Israel has shown that the cost will be high on the Israeli people there. So the Americans took a few steps back to reevaluate the strategy here, but they made sure to intervene and bomb the last day. This is just my humble opinion, also to send one also extra message, and that is we are going to continue with these Abraham Accords in the region, and there are two other countries going to join, Syria and Lebanon. And we know that you may have means to sabotage it, so we're sending you a clear message, stay away from these files. Lebanon and Syria are going to join the Abraham Accords, and I'm going to show you guys a photo. This week was published by an organization called the Abraham. It's called Abraham Shield, AbrahamShield.org. And this photo is basically in Tel Aviv. As you can see, those are the so-called Arab leaders who either accepted publicly or tacitly to normalize ties with Israel, including the president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, which I told you from the beginning, this is the man of the United States and Saudi Arabia when he came to power. And I said, this is a big setback for Hezbollah. And he came right after the invasion of Lebanon by Israel. And they imposed this candidate on Lebanon so that he would work on disarming Hezbollah and he will normalize ties with Israel. And the second one is, of course, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the selected president of Syria, as you can see, is also smiling to Donald Trump. So it seems that Syria and Lebanon both are going to join this alliance. And one of the indicators for it is, of course, also this map from the website itself. And they put Syria as on the lighter green side, which says potential to expand Abraham coalition. And this was something unimaginable only a few months ago.
Yeah, they got very far. I mean, this is a very dark, very grim moment, you know. If you look at this together, they have destroyed Syria, they have subjugated Syria, they've installed their own man in Syria. This is what has happened. They have maybe not destroyed, but crippled Hezbollah, right? They have not been able to destroy Ansar Allah Yemen, but they have boxed them in, you know. But I mean, they can't. Ansar Allah Yemen can't change the overall game with all their courage. And then in the end, they went for Iran itself. And so the only bright spot on the horizon is, I think it's real, is that Iran didn't fall. Because that, I think, was the complete scenario. That's how the game was supposed to unfold. We take out, as you have explained recently very well in another show, but we take out all these alliance or allies of Iran. And when Iran is alone, we take out Iran as well, right? We do regime change. So as you pointed out, Iran kept firing back at Israel. Iran also fired back at the United States, but we all know that was a little bit sort of, you know, symbolical. But the attacks, the defensive attacks against Israel, the self-defense against Israel was very real, right? They really did some damage there. And you know, this is very important, not because I like people killed, but because a state that maintains the capacity to fight back is still a state, This is so important about this. It's not only how many rockets can you fire. It's not only how many of them reach your enemy. The question also is, as long as you're firing, your chain of command is actually operating.
Yes.
So if the Israelis destroyed very significant parts of the chain of command of Iran on the very first day, on the 13th, right? The Iranians were showing them after the shock, hey, we are still operating. Yeah, you did damage, but you didn't decapitate us. We are still there. Our brain is still operating, and it can still give commands to the parts of our state that can fight back.
Yes.
So this is the one bright spot, that Iran hasn't fallen yet. That's it. Iran has been cornered, it has been isolated, and then it was massively attacked, and it didn't fall. But apart from that, as this picture shows, unfortunately, they got very, very far. Unfortunately.
Yes. One of our friends says, Lays Marouf said the Prime Minister of Lebanon will be killed if he joins the Abraham Accords. And I would like to say I respectfully disagree, because that happens once in the 80s when Bashir Gemayel was supported by Israel to become the president of the country and sign a peace treaty with Israel. But the 80s was the beginning of Hezbollah. Remember that. And back then, it wasn't only Hezbollah. It was also the communists, the socialists, the PLO, Amal, Syria. There were like so many forces fighting against Israel in Lebanon. Who is fighting against Israel now in Lebanon? Hezbollah itself, and they have neutralized many of its missile capabilities on the borders with Israel, because now the Lebanese army is going after every storage of weapons and rockets there. They have the maps from Israel, and they are taking over these weapons and destroying them, and say that we will send Hezbollah to the north of the Litani River. So I truly don't agree with the premise that normalization is impossible in Lebanon. And I'm not saying it will happen, but it's not impossible. And people need to be a little bit realistic about this case when we put the balance of power, and we're not advocating for normalization at all. And I believe normalization is under no circumstances it will bring any fruitful, meaningful, let's say, it will not help the people itself, especially that Israel has established itself as a dominant power, and they are able to completely subjugate not only the governments but also the population of these regions. The way Israel is acting in the region like a rabid dog, basically coming after every people and every government, and they need a resistance against them to stop this process. So who is the resistance?
If I may say, I totally agree with you, and I would put it like this. Normalization is, of course, a euphemism. It's a nice word for something really ugly. And when you translate normalization, Abraham Accords, into normal language, what you really get is full submission to Israel.
Yes.
That's what normalization is. Full submission to Israel. That's what normalization really is. You could also call it collaboration. Although I almost feel collaboration isn't even strong enough, actually, right? So nobody here, Kevork or I, obviously, I think I can say for both of us, we discussed this is a disgusting phenomenon to us. We abhor it. But unfortunately, as I was saying, unfortunately, the bad guys, to use American slang for a moment, and I mean the Israelis and the US, the bad guys have been very, very successful recently. I don't think it's forever, but recently they've done far too well.
I just also want to say about the reports that the people say probably Israel used a small nuke. Guys, all these things, like in the past, also one of the commentators said, one of the commentators also said that Syria has secret nuclear weapons, and this person is pro-axis of resistance. And he said that after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Soviet generals have given secretly Syria nuclear weapons. Do you know, guys, if nuke needs storage, and it will be obvious to everyone that Syria has nukes. It's not something a candy that you can hide, right? So many people are making exaggerations, and to be honest with you, I don't agree with this analysis.
I'm sorry, that's a wishful fantasy. Neither the Soviet Union nor the Russians, as they are now, would easily give someone nukes. They're far too serious about this stuff, and far too far They're looking far ahead. They're not just handing out nukes like, rewards or something.
Yes.
The other thing is, look, for me, the strongest reason why I don't think Israel has used nuclear weapons is that they don't have to. They don't have to.
No.
They have enormous destructive potential without them. They have everything they need to murder everyone they want to murder. We've seen that in Gaza. I mean, Kevork and I have mentioned this before on an earlier show, but we know that the explosive power that Israel has brought to bear on Gaza now amounts to several Hiroshima bombs all over, several, multiplied. So the difference is not the explosive power. They have all of this. You get this with conventional weapons nowadays. You don't need nukes. The difference is you don't have radiation and you don't have the political consequences.
That's
and
true.
If you think like an Israeli, they're completely ruthless. For them, it doesn't make any sense to pay the political consequence. They can get the same mass murder without nuclear weapons, and that's what they're doing.
Actually, Tarik is very correct, guys. Look at this new article published in Haaretz. This is 100,000 dead. What we know about Gaza through death toll. And basically, this is a scientific research. And what they're doing is basically going through the numbers and the names and the birth dates of the people who were killed. And there is a new study on this case. The death toll in Gaza, as reported by the Palestinian Health Ministry, understates the true scale of the crisis. Researchers say hunger, disease, and Israeli gunfire at food distribution centers have made the war in the Strip one of the bloodiest of the 21st century. So this research basically is not coming from Palestine, right? This is not the Palestinian research itself. And in this case, the number is that what they say Hamas-linked health ministry is basically a conservative number compared to the real numbers.
Definite undercount, massive undercount. Yeah.
So that's a situation in Gaza. And I think also whether it's in Gaza or Syria or Lebanon or in Iran, they don't need to use nukes. Nukes are it's not, when we say it is a last resort and it's the resort that they could do if they are feeling under existential threat, Israel didn't feel that they are under existential threat.
No, because they are the perpetrators. They were never under existential threat. They always pretend they are so that they can then murder everybody around them. Look, I give you an example of what Israel really needs its nuclear weapons for, right? And it's a bit surprising, I think, to some people. In 2003, a very well-known military historian called Martin van Creveld, who was Israeli, but originally I think he had come from the Netherlands, right? As many of them, he was a colonial settler, right? So Martin van Creveld was a very important, very well-known man in the field of military history. And he said to a very important journalist, Robert Fisk, who reported it, and Fisk was an extremely reliable guy, that the reason why Israel has nukes isn't only about threatening its potential enemies in the region. So it's not merely, in quotation marks, about threatening Iran, threatening Syria at the time still. No, he said something else. And it's breathtaking. He said, our nukes are on submarines, or at least some of them. Nobody knows where they are, right? You know how nuclear submarines operate, right? That's why they are on submarines. They're hidden.
Yes.
Nobody knows where they are. Nobody can strike them first. And if we, the Israeli state, if we ever go down, we will take with us everyone. That's what he actually said. This was not a crank. I mean, it was a crank, but he was also a serious academic. He was a major professor at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He was internationally acknowledged. And him saying that, believe me, didn't come out of nowhere. He was being used to make a statement that a government can't make. And the statement was, he literally said, who knows where our nuclear weapons on the submarines are pointed? Maybe they're pointed at Rome as well. He literally mentioned Rome. And then he said it again. He made it very clear. If we ever face the end of our state, we are not just going to take away our enemies with us. We are going to take our friends. And you understand the logic behind this, right? It's blackmail.
Yes.
It basically means you, the West, can never drop us. Because if you drop us and we fail, we will drag you into nuclear Armageddon. That's what he said, 2003.
Yeah.
Look it up. There's a Guardian article, right?
Yeah.
This is not fringe stuff.
By the way, just before I go to the last question, Tarik, when I turn on my TV to watch, I turn on some YouTube to watch some podcast, and every advertisement that you receive now on YouTube in Germany is paid by the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and they're talking about the missile range of Iran, which could reach to Berlin. Like they're literally fear-mongering people here in Berlin that Iran could potentially fire nuclear weapons again.
People know that the missile ranges of Israeli nukes probably reach to Berlin as well. Very probably. That doesn't matter. Nobody's allowed to think about that because Israel is the one country in the world. There's only one such case. There are 9 countries with nuclear weapons, including Israel. There's only one. They are not part of the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have submitted to absolutely no international law concerning nukes. These nukes are completely blacked out, right? Only the Israelis have any sort of control over them or any sort of idea of where they are, what they are, and so on. But they are allowed to exist. That's Israel, right?
Yep.
Israel is like North Korea, except the West accepts it, right? That's the big difference. North Korea also is outside these systems, but North Korea, everybody loves to hate North Korea in the West, right? With far fewer good reasons than Israel, actually. But Israel is exactly the same and worse, but everybody in the West has decided with Israel, it's okay.
Yeah. How many countries North Korea invaded since the end of the Korean War?
No, Israel is a much more aggressive, much more dangerous power. There's absolutely no doubt if you analyze it objectively. Absolutely. It's empirical,
Indeed. I was going to ask you one more question, Tarik, but we can spare that for our next conversation for next week. Next week, guys, on Friday, we're going to do the 12th podcast conversation with Tarik. If you're liking this show, please hit the like button before leaving this stream and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are now over 101,000 subscriptions something. So I would really appreciate it if you subscribe also to this YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Tarik, again for coming to the show. I really appreciate your insights and learning from you as well. And thank you so much, guys, also for tuning in, whether you're watching on YouTube, on Rumble, on Ganjin World. This is going to be the last show of this week. The next one is on Monday. So have a great weekend. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.